Hi, everyone. Thank you to all of our advisors and partners making it to the last day of Elevate. It's a little bit bittersweet for me to say that because it's been such a fun week. I think we can all agree it flew by. I hope you all enjoyed the connections and the networking opportunities provided to awaken and reinvent the future of travel. We have a great luxury travel panel planned, so thank you for tuning in. As many of you know, travel reporters and the press have been absolutely critical in their storytelling during this time. With that said, it's truly an honor to have these esteemed panelists sharing insights that will be incredibly valuable for our travel advisors, partners, and employees. You'll hear the latest on luxury travel now and into the future. These panelists have been in the trenches right alongside of us this entire time, and they've been sharing the advisor's story, the consumer's story, and helping us become a community. So a round of applause for all of our reporter friends. To our advisors, you're the inspiration behind making travel possible. Our travel advisors are at the core of the Global Travel Collection, and as they book incredible vacations and meaningful experiences for our clients, they ensure seamless luxury and leisure travel, business travel, corporate travel, experiences for production and entertainment, and MICE. Travel advisors are the humans behind curating travel experiences. I believe you all will agree with me on that. You are a crucial part of this travel industry, and thank you so much. I'm now going to pass it over to Kelly, who will be moderating this incredible panel. Miss Kelly, you're on.
Thank you so much, Angie. Appreciate it. What a great welcome to kick this off. So I'll just go into it in introducing our incredible panelists today. We have Arnie Weissman, Editor-in-Chief of Travel Weekly. Arnie is the Editor-in-Chief of Travel Weekly and the Executive Vice President, Editorial Director for its parent company, North Star Travel Group, the largest business-to-business travel media company in the world, serving audiences in the Americas, Asia, and Europe. And his commentary has also appeared on CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, BBC, and Sky News Television, and many more. So then we have Stellene Volandes, the Editor-in-Chief of Town & Country, and the Editorial Director of Elle Decor. She is the author of Jeweler, Masters, Mavericks, and Visionaries of Modern Design, and Jewels That Made History. Thanks so much to both of you for being here. And then we have Victoria M. Walker, Senior Travel Reporter at The Points Guy, and she covers the pandemic's effect on travel at TPG. She writes heavily reported features, special reports, and first-person essays. Victoria's travel writing has been seen in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and she's also been seen and heard on ABC News' Good Morning America, NPR's All Things Considered, and Slate. So thank you so much, Victoria, for being here. And then we have Natalie Compton, staff writer at the Washington Post, and she is an advice columnist for the Washington Post travel destination, by the way. And she has been incredible as well in reporting alongside her fellow reporters here today. Her journalism career in 2015 began when she was living in Southeast Asia and has since filed stories on travel, food, and spirits from every continent. Natalie has covered everything from how airplane food gets made in Bangkok to the magic of Finnish sauna culture for national and international outlets, including GQ, Vice, LA Times, Wired, Bon Appetit, and among many others. So thank you, Natalie. And then we have Paul Feinstein, travel reporter, editor for quite a few publications and contributing writer such as Robb Report, Travel and Leisure, Voters Travel, Lonely Planet, Time Out, Culture Trip, and NBC Universal, and has been writing, editing in Los Angeles and around the world for more than 20 years. He has written travel guides to LA, Bangkok, Tokyo, Florence, and Barcelona, and has written for a myriad of publications that I mentioned. And Paul is an avid traveler and has traveled more to 55 countries and lived in Israel, and is particularly obsessed with Italy and Japan. So thank you, Paul, for being here. And then we have April Hutchinson, editor of TTG Luxury Media in the UK. And she takes care of editorial strategy for TTG Luxury, the UK's foremost B2B premium travel magazine. She also oversees the brand's online content and live events program, covering Luxpo, the TTG Luxury Travel Summit, the TTG Luxury Travel Awards, and she has worked for the brand's owner for 13 years and part of her varied 25-year career in publishing. So thank you to all of our incredible panelists today. I appreciate you being here, and we'll just get started. So I just wanted to kick it off. Obviously, we are speaking to a variety of audiences of travel advisors and our supplier partners and employees, but would love to know, as writers who cover luxury travel, what are you seeing in terms of luxury travel trends, and what are your readers most interested in? So to start, we'll start with Victoria.
Thank you for having me, Kelly. What we're seeing is a big rebound in terms of how luxury travelers want to travel. I think when we first got into the pandemic, a lot of people were concerned that, nobody would ever want to go back to the Maldives again. Nobody would ever want to go back to Seychelles or, take these big, massive, expensive trips to the Caribbean. But we're seeing actually the complete opposite. We're seeing that if destinations open, travelers will go. And now the destinations are opening, travelers are going. So we're seeing those people booking trips halfway around the world to go to the Maldives again. We're seeing the hotels start to offer promotions to really get people back into being comfortable staying in hotels, flying on luxury airlines. And so I would say while luxury travel isn't completely back, it isn't nearly as decimated as we would have thought thinking this time last year or even in the early days of the pandemic. And so what we're saying is that a lot of people are excited about traveling, taking luxury travel, but also people who normally before the pandemic might not have. And so I think that's something that we're really going to have to watch in the next 2 years or so in terms of luxury travel.
Absolutely. Thank you, Victoria. And Stellene, how about yourself?
No, I hear, what Victoria was saying. I think especially the death of luxury travel is greatly exaggerated, to borrow a phrase, like the death of New York, like the death of so many things. And I think, we're using the phrase luxury travel. Nothing is better at underlying what a luxury travel is than being in quarantine for 18 months, right? So even all of us who, traveled so much for work and sometimes complained about it, now the idea of taking a trip just feels like the greatest gift. And I think that our experience is reflected in so many of our readers' experiences. And as soon as, as Victoria said, as soon as places open up, people want to go there. I traveled to Greece this summer, and a lot of people were there because the country made very clear May 14th, they were going to open up. These were the restrictions. These were the rules. And so people could plan a bit ahead. I think that for a luxury traveler, the responsibility, or I would say the smart thing for any agent to do or hotel to do or airline to do is the experience has to be even smoother than it ever was. Because the moment a bit of chaos enters the experience, you feel unsafe. And the thing that can dispel the luxury myth and experience right now is really that, is the sense that I'm not in a controlled environment. People are not thinking about me or what's going to keep me safe. And I think that really, it rattles people more than ever. Even though we're all anxious to travel, nerves are on edge a bit. And I think that luxury travel groups or agents or hotels or airlines need to really keep that in mind, that the calm is especially luxurious right now.
Absolutely. And Arnie, how about you?
It's something that we noticed that touches a little bit on what, or a lot on what Stellene just said, is that people are wanting to stay in one place longer. It's a matter to some extent of the fewer borders, the better. So, in terms of our coverage, we're luxury or not, we're not shying away from the nuts and bolts. In terms of what you need to do to get to a place, because the rules are different country to country. I mean, it's sort of astounding the number of different rules that there might be. And it doesn't matter how much money you spend, you still have to, get the PCR test, or you still have to get the antigen test. So that's sort of the testing and what type of testing, the times on that, the passenger locator record forms that have to be filled out. Sometimes then there have to be tests on the other side too. Then there's the test to come back. All of this, I think, the reward is greater than the hassle. There's no question about it. But still, this is what concerns people. And as Stellene said, kind of can easily break the sense of I'm going on a luxury trip.
Absolutely. And Paul, over to you.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of the same stuff. I think just even in my own travels over the last year is just being able to get through the clutter of the minutia of what Arnie was saying and what Stellene was saying, is that it's so hard to know what to download, what to fill out. Every place, even Hawaii, has different forms than coming back to California, and it's so confusing that I think travelers are really looking for that streamlined experience. The other thing I'm really seeing a lot of is individualized experiences where people don't want to interact with others because they don't know where they've been or where their kids have been and who's been in what environment that's been indoors or not. And so I think I'm starting to see a lot more of, individualized experiences that you can just you and your family, and it's touchless, and there's nobody else involved, and to feeling more safe in how you're traveling.
Absolutely. And April, yourself?
Hi everyone, thanks for having me here. And I'll echo a lot of what everybody said. Obviously, our magazine is focused on the trade, what's happening in the trade. So it's been a really fast-paced kind of life to live, because you're just trying to get the news out as quick as possible, and let the advisors get the information as quick as possible, and just pivot and swap destinations where they can if they need to. I'm sure it's the same for you guys, but we've seen this massive uptick in private jet usage, and whereas it used to be for a certain few, more people are coming through on that now. I saw a figure that said 71% of people who've used it for the first time because of the pandemic would use it after the pandemic, because they are seeing the efficiencies it brings to them, the bubble, the privacy, all those kind of things that we keep hearing about luxury travelers are really looking for. Of course, we've seen people experience things a lot more on their doorstep. Scotland for us has been incredible. It's a place that many people never really gave much time to, but they've been able to because they haven't been able to go to the Maldives, or it really does depend on your restrictions as a citizen. Where can you go? Where can't you go? And certainly we've had this huge boom in UK cruising, where we've seen all the lines, take their ships as much as they can around the British Isles, which again is not something we ever thought we would see. That has brought lots of new to cruise customers, Celebrity was telling me, which is a really interesting thing to come out of it. It really just depends on where we've been able to go. And as to your original point, luxury travelers, well, everybody wants to travel, right? But luxury travelers do have the means more than most. We've seen this massive disparity in the cost of testing, as I'm sure you've seen in our headlines over here. I'm sure it's the same there. And it's not about the cost of testing for the affluent traveler. It's about the hassle and the uncertainty. So the more we can do to try and reassure people, the better. For us, it's important for our journalists to get out as much as they can and to share their stories. We're seeing travel advisors getting out about themselves. sharing their stories, so we can give the reassurance that says, hey guys, it's okay to travel. You know, it is possible. And you know, as you said about Greece earlier, I was in Greece and it was packed, and I had so many American voices, and I was like, what? How are they all here? It's incredible. You know, so I think it's also a shift in the dynamics of source markets we're really seeing around countries as well.
Amazing. They're there because of the travel advisors. And over to Natalie.
Yeah, so I think it's been interesting for the normal traveler. We've been dealing with things like rental car shortages, but with what everybody said, since more luxury travelers are getting back out there and they do want to take private jets and they do want to go to the Maldives, there's not a lot of inventory there for all of these people to be throwing all of their money at it. So I found it interesting to see shortages in, all the private jet charters to Aspen in December are getting booked up, or the best private islands aren't available now. So what are the ultra high net worth individuals going to do? They're going to have to go to their second tier private island. But an interesting trend that I noticed also just talking to people is the idea of, yes, a travel advisor is going to help you get through all those restrictions, but also a fixer on the ground is becoming more of a luxury and something that people want to navigate not only this chaotic time, but they want an experience that's different from everybody else's trip to Greece or to Tokyo or to wherever. So I think the fixer will be key in making people feel more comfortable and like they have this insider, cooler experience. But obviously, what everyone else said is also true.
Thank you. And we'll start with you for this next question. Just in terms of luxury travel and the way that you cover it in all of your publications, how has it changed for you over the past 18 months? So we'll have everyone answer, but Natalie, if you want to take that one to start.
I did not think I was going to have to talk to as many doctors in my life as we have had to. I have epidemiologists on speed dial, so that is new for me. I thought travel was like, I got to talk to Scott Keys, but now it's just like, can I get Johns Hopkins on the phone? So that's been a very big change for, I think, all of us in not just thinking about travel, about how to get there and how to do it cheaply or responsibly. Now it's like, is it safe to go? Is it safe for the locals to go there? Can I go? What does the CDC say? So obviously that's been not only a different style of writing, but a way different approach to how we talk about travel.
Right, absolutely. And April, yourself?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, it's been really interesting to see how we have done so much more online events ourselves. It's been so important for us to get agents on screen, talking to each other, talking to the audience. You know, we've become TV presenters. You know, I never signed up to be a TV presenter when I did a journalism course, but that's, you know, it's what it's all about. Live, you know, quick coverage, quick conversations. Look what's happening. How can we talk about it? Let's get it out there. I've had this amazing privilege, really, to be able to talk to people from around the world. You know, I remember early on interviewing Roque Spia from Metropolitan Touring, a person I'd never had a chance to meet in my life, but there we were on this amazing conversation on screen. So there's been some lovely opportunities like that, but it's obviously been incredibly difficult for us as well, covering the trade. Well, for everybody as a journalist, because you're trying to, you know, you're dealing with incredibly emotional stories about what's happening from the travel advisor community, you know, layoffs, difficult times that people are going through. So we're trying to, you know, build people up, but also tell those stories and just not let it affect yourself too much. So yeah, and we always see ourselves as just an extension of the travel advisor community. And we've realised that even more so than ever in the past 18 months, for sure. But also, you know, trying to find those massively positive stories, things that people might have done in their local communities, and trying to keep that conservation story on the front page as well, making sure we, you know, continue to try and help those, you know, possibly destinations that are struggling because they haven't got the tourism dollars coming in. So yeah, just really trying to find some hopeful stories, but also trying to cope as a journalist with, you know, what it's kind of like to filter these kind of stories that are coming through as well. So yeah, very, very difficult, challenging, but you know, really different times. Yeah.
Right, of course. And Arnie.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think prior to the pandemic, we would focus on product news, on incremental developments, on things that were moving at a relatively slow speed. But with the pandemic, of course, things changed. And I think we started paying more attention to, let's say, interior landscapes as well as exterior landscapes, how people's, the psychology of society was changing, and then how that impacted travel. And with, there's a balance that I think we really struggled with in terms of, we're a news organization. So we want everything to be to keep objectivity, but we also felt we had a responsibility to inspire and to keep people, because they were, in fact, this is the livelihood for all of our readers, and to keep hope alive in the darkest hours of it. And so that blend of inspiration and candor became very important. And we've always had that at some level, but it took center stage.
Yes, I know that so many of the travel advisors, are reading everyone's news coverage here. So having that inspiration is super helpful for them as they're, incredibly busy booking and rebooking and dealing with all of these different things. So thanks to everyone for that. And Victoria, how about yourself?
I definitely want to echo Natalie's point. The Points Guy, we're a website that covers points and miles, and we immediately pivoted from covering about how to fly first class to Bangkok to, is it safe to travel, which PCR test is allowed to get into which country, vaccination requirements. And so, it was definitely jarring. And I think in a lot of ways, a lot of us at the Points Guy have taken sort of the role of sort of like a travel advisor, contextualizing what travel looks like for people, because even the most well-traveled people still have a lot of questions and concerns about what it means to travel right now. The PCR test that may be accepted in one country may not be accepted in another. And the vaccine passport you use in one country may not be accepted in another. And you may be able to go to Phuket, but you might not be able to fly into Bangkok to get into Phuket. And so those very, small niche details really add up. And so for people who do want to travel, we've really taken it upon ourselves to really kind of contextualize even the smallest detail to help people decide whether they want to travel right now or not.
Right, absolutely. I love that comparison to the reporters becoming a travel advisor themselves, because I'm sure, that has been somewhat of the experience for many people. And Paul, over to you for this one.
Yeah, so I sort of look at it like a weird timeline of how things changed. At first, like Natalie, talking to doctors and scientists, trying to figure out what the hell's going on, and what we can actually tell people, what they can touch or not touch, if you're washing your groceries or not, how long to microwave your food, which we all know is kind of nonsense at this point, but that's how it started. Then my writing got into finding, these harrowing experiences of people trying to come home to America who are all over the world, and really doing real reporting and digging in and finding like how these people are trying to get home and trying to help those people get connected with consulates and whatnot. That was a big thing that I was doing early on. Then it moved to, cooking at home, and on the luxury side, like finding your indulgences. And I've seen this huge uptick in at-home caviar, at-home sake, at-home, real luxury goods that, otherwise weren't at your fingertips. And then finally, where it evolved with me was a lot, which I'm not really used to, but love doing, was, you're putting yourself in the story, a lot of first person narrative of how I traveled to this place or that place and what I had to go through in order to make that happen. And I think there was a lot of interest around, oh, that's really interesting, I want to go on a trip. How did you actually do it? And really laying it out from, nuts to bolts to like really how you travel to a new destination at this time. And so it's just been this real interesting arc that's sort of followed every wave that's come and gone. It's been fascinating.
Right. Oh my goodness. Well, we're still in it together. And over to you, Stellene.
Sure. When Arnie said equal parts inspiration and candor, I think that really expresses probably what we're all feeling. But I know at a magazine like Town and Country, whose travel coverage before this, I would say, was probably 100% inspiration. I think the sense of responsibility to add candor into that coverage, we feel very deeply. And I think that our coverage now has a heightened sensitivity and a heightened sense of responsibility. Because I think even in the luxury space, there are travelers who would go anywhere. And now you see there's a real disparity between people's comfort levels. Some people who would have gone anywhere 2 years ago are ready to do that again. And some people that even would surprise you feel like they will only travel domestically, because what if they go and they get their negative PCR, they get a positive PCR test and they're stuck someplace for 2 weeks. That fear, I think, is something that every luxury travel advisor and and luxury property needs to address and somehow communicate a bit better on. Because I think that so much of luxury travel is the sense of being carefree, right? Wherever you go and just like revel in the experience. And right now, even when you're doing that, there is this sort of cloud of anxiety about that test to come back if you're outside of the US or in any place that requires that test, because I'm just back from a big business trip to Paris, and the last couple of days, all any of my colleagues were talking about is, what are we going to do if we get a positive test? And I think even when I was away this summer, that was the conversation too. So again, sort of this, this sort of myth that luxury travel and this sort of cocoon it sort of envelops you in when you're in the experience gets sort of disrupted by that. And I think that when we cover luxury travel right now in a magazine like Town and Country or Elle Decor, you have to be honest to say, first of all, if you're comfortable doing this, because everyone's comfort level is so different. And to be very honest, again, to use Arnie's word, candor, to be honest about what the experience is like and what you have to do in order to benefit from the luxury travel experience, which we know there's so much to benefit from, but it is a bit different now.
Right, absolutely. And you kind of covered my next two questions that I had prepared here about, luxury travelers. Are they still traveling? Did they ever stop traveling? And did vaccination mandates make a difference for luxury travel? So I guess I'm just going to throw it out to maybe Natalie to start with on this one, and then we can go from there.
It seems like the vaccine mandates did matter. We know that there are certain places where you can't go as a vaccinated traveler, or the borders are totally closed. Those places are not on the lists of luxury travel advisors, places that they're sending people. So those have mattered. Obviously, I think it also makes people who care about vaccines and global health more comfortable traveling, knowing that there's a vaccine mandate in a place, and that encourages people to go to an Italy or a France or wherever. So no, they did not stop traveling. And it was hard to look at sometimes when it was really early in the pandemic, being like, look at that yacht you have out there, all safe to yourself. But now we're all traveling, so we're all in the same boat, not a yacht.
We're ready for a yacht trip. I think everyone is. Arnie, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, the vaccination was a game changer, and it's really interesting. I've actually been on 2 cruises where it was all vaccinated passengers on the cruise ships. And if you had to be vaccinated, and you had to have an antigen test immediately before boarding. And there were some CDC and ex-CDC, I should say, ex-FDA officials who were on board. And I asked one of them, is there any instance in which you would feel compelled to wear a mask on this ship? And he said, oh, yes, just before I get off for a shore excursion. So the sense of the vaccination in particular, giving a sense of comfort, I think has been very, very significant, and particularly for if you're traveling abroad, but even if you're traveling domestically, it gives you a sense of a shield that you didn't have before.
Yes, definitely. And April.
Yeah, it definitely made a big difference to us in the UK. Of course, it depends where you are in your vaccination journey as a country. You may have seen for us, we were quite angry in that we had such a high level of vaccination, yet borders, we were not being allowed to travel as freely as we would have hoped. But it, absolutely made a big difference in people's confidence. It still always just depends on the individual, of course, as to whether you feel that confidence. I agree with Arnie in terms of the cruise. I also did the cruise over the summer, and you do feel you're in a bubble really, because everyone's vaccinated, and I had 4 tests over the course of 8 days when I was in Greece for one reason or another. So it has made a huge difference. And I guess for the UK, there was a point, if you remember, when it was illegal to travel. So, every country's been on their own journey. And yes, some people may still have gone over and above that. And that perhaps, if we're talking about travel advisors, that perhaps made them make a moral question as to whether they were going to help a traveler make those trips. But that's all comes again down to the individual. So of course, people have been traveling where they can. And the vaccinations definitely made a huge difference. Of course, the question comes in for people who cannot or will not have a vaccination. Do they deserve to be, down the list when it comes to freedom for travel? Which is why I think, and I hope, I don't know what the others think, we probably will run parallel still with testing for a while to come. So,
Right. Over to you, Victoria.
Yeah, so I don't really think people stop traveling, and not even just luxury travelers. I think some people were going to travel regardless. One thing I'm noticing is that while I'm noticing that travelers are really, many travelers I've interacted with, spoken to, reported on, are comfortable with the vaccine mandates. One thing I have noticed in my own travels for work or for pleasure is that it's not necessarily the vaccine mandate, it's the distance, it's the other things that are involved in the travel journey. And so I went to Thailand in July to cover the reopening of the Phuket Sandbox. And Phuket has a vaccine mandate, and Phuket had actually hoped 100,000 people would visit Thailand between July and September. And they fell far short of that number, and they only hit 40,000. And that's partly, it's what I found was that it wasn't the vaccine mandate, it was the other requirements to get into Thailand, but also the just sheer distance Thailand is from much of the world. And so my own experience is there, I ran into very few Americans, mainly people from other parts of Southeast Asia and the Middle East. And so, the vaccine mandate, what I'm seeing is that it doesn't, for the people who want to travel, they're willing to comply with the vaccine mandate because they get to travel. But there are other, concerns about, sure, there might be a vaccine mandate, but I have to also sit on a plane for 26 hours to get to a place. And so what I found was that on my flights to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, the flights were, pretty full, but on the flights to Phuket, they're, these are Boeing 777 jets capable of seating 350 people, and the plane is halfway empty. And that's, again, that's, the distance required, the sheer amount of time you have to sit on a jet in, the middle of a global pandemic, that still rubs people, kind of the wrong way, even if, they're all right with the vaccine requirement or all right with travel in general.
Right. Oh my goodness. That probably was an interesting experience to have. And Paul, over to you.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add other than the vaccines made a huge difference that I've seen just from people willing and able and wanting to travel. I think I'm more fascinated by the amount of people in the United States who refuse to get vaccinated and still think that's their right to get on a plane without a mask or without a vaccine, and seeing how that's going to play out. I'm actually kind of hoping that we get full mandates on everything, but we'll see.
Thanks, Paul. And let's talk a little bit about the role of the travel advisor in luxury travel planning. Do you think people are coming to understand more and appreciate the value of the travel advisor? And we will start with Paul, since we just ended with you.
Yeah, one of the things I'm seeing more interest in are these travel clubs, which I guess is really coming down to what these travel advisors are also doing. Clubs like Exclusive Resorts or Inspirato. But I think, a lot of the panels already talked about this, specifically, where the travel advisor right now, for the luxury traveler, it's got to be their job to know everything about that destination when it comes to the pandemic. They got to be able to tell you what forms you got to fill out. They got to be able to tell you what the vaccination status is. They got to be able to get you the right masks to feel comfortable, and all the different policies of a country. I think the travel advisor, it's not just about finding the cool place or the cool experience anymore. It's also the minutia of all the semantics of pandemic travel. Like I just can't even imagine spending a ton of money going to a place and still having questions about how I get out, or if I'm positive on my test, or how do I get my test, or whatever it may be. I think the travel advisor, their role has to be much, much broader than it ever was before.
Right, absolutely. And I know during this time, the travel advisors have really just come to save the day and really came to the rescue in so many instances when the borders were closing. Even when I remember talking with one travel advisor, and she mentioned that a client of hers was in an igloo somewhere like very far off, and she started to look at these different flights for them to get back, and somehow got in touch with him even though there was no service, and was able to get him and his family back. So instances like that, where you hear these incredible stories of really how they came to the rescue. I think, there is this reemergence of the value of a travel advisor and how important they are. Really, any consumer should not be booking travel without a travel advisor, is my personal opinion. But anyway, Arnie, how about yourself?
Yeah, actually, we have a page one story on Monday about the media coverage that has led to a lot of calls and movement to travel advisors, because for all the reasons that have been discussed, going to somebody with expertise both adds a level of comfort for the traveler and also just makes sense. There's just too many details. So one of the things, though, from the travel advisor side, and this is what our story was about because we're basically an industry publication, was that this has kind of puts a strange burden, it's a kind of a double-edged sword. All the good coverage in Stellene, I saw the article that was in Town and Country, very positive story, urging people to go to travel advisors. And what travel advisors were telling us was that these kind of newbies, the people who many of them had never used a travel advisor before, require a bit more hand-holding than people who had maybe last gone to a travel advisor before Expedia was born. So there's a lot more movement to the travel agencies. And what one of the advisors said, which I thought was interesting, was that one thing that is, let's say, a trend that picked up during the pandemic is that a lot of advisors and agencies which previously had shied away from charging fees had begun to charge fees. And because there's a lot more work to do, but it also sort of separates the people who are serious from shoppers, because a lot of people can waste a travel advisor's time asking lots of questions and then they go and book online or something. But once the fee is introduced, you find out whether or not the client is serious and move forward. And these new clients do take more time. The fees are really justified.
Absolutely. And Natalie, over to you.
think it's insane that there, weren't fees before. I get so many people, and I'm sure everybody else here does too, who come to you and they're like, "Oh, tell me what to do and yada yada," and they never take half of the advice. And you're like, why did I type out all of those recommendations? So it makes sense for me that they would be charging. But I think that right now it does seem more valuable than people might have thought before. They're like, oh, I can Google my own flights. I can find a hotel myself. But it's not your full-time job to stay up to date on what the travel restrictions are to go to the Caribbean or to go to France. So while you're doing your 9 to 5, everything is changing. And there's a travel advisor, if you used one, who's like fixing your flights or making sure that they set you up with a new appointment. So there's obviously a giant value that I think is probably bringing a lot more people to travel advisors, and that's great. It's I love travel, so I'm happy to have people traveling well.
Thanks,
Natalie, those people are called assholes.
There are so many of them.
Oh my goodness. Well, thanks for that perspective. And Stellene, yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Arnie mentioned we just did a piece on townandcountrymag.com, but I think, sort of connecting it back to what I said before, the fear of being stranded someplace for whatever reason was, I think, probably 2 years ago, this sort of remote possibility. It is a reality that is at the sort of forefront of all these people's minds right now. And the idea that you could be stranded with no one to call is I think, really what is keeping some people from traveling. Whereas, I want to feel like if I'm in an igloo someplace, that someone is going to help me get out. And I think right now there's a possibility that a border could close or requirements can change, or again, that sort of positive PCR test can keep me someplace for 2 weeks. I want to know that I can call an expert who can help me, who can guide me, and who can possibly get me out, right? So traveling right now without an advisor makes you really sort of, I think it makes you feel stranded, whether you are or not. You're sort of out there on your own it's a new landscape. Even at the top level of travel, it's a new landscape and you need someone to guide you. Absolutely.
Right, exactly. Definitely agree with you there. For the next question, I would love to hear from all of you again. I know we're coming up a little bit on time, and just want to remind everyone in the chat, if you want to submit some questions, go ahead and do so. But for the next one, how can we, both riders and travel advisors and our different, hotel, airline, cruise partners all work together to get people to start traveling again and to consider luxury travel experiences? So maybe Victoria, we'll start with you on that one, and then also would love to hear from you on that, and then also about the value of a travel advisor from before too.
Yeah, so I think one thing right now, everybody who is traveling right now, they want to feel like they're safe. They want to feel like, yeah, sure, I'm going to have the best trip of my life, but I'm also going to come home, I'm going to come home in one piece. And I think that's, something that like both the travel industry and also like reporters can really, help each other, help ultimately the reader and, the person who is ultimately consuming travel. To answer the previous question, one thing I've noticed is that I think travel advisors has definitely been more important because they help travelers think about the things that they normally wouldn't have thought about. When you're booking a flight, they ask if you want like travel insurance. You typically check no because it's like an extra $27 fee. What I'm seeing now is that like travel advisors are really helping travelers say, no, you actually need to book the travel insurance, because if you get stuck, that's going to be a lot of money. That's going to be a lot of money to pay for your 2-week quarantine. And, some countries, you can only quarantine at specific hotels. Those hotels can range in fees. And so, if you get stuck, that could be $12, $15, $3,000. The PCR test, the food. God forbid if you need to be evacuated out of the country. That is it. All of those fees add up and can, turn a nice trip into a financial disaster, like financial ruin, really. And so that's one thing that I've noticed that the travel advisors have really been drilling home into people who are booking travel. Like, hey, like I'm gonna walk you through every step that you need, and we're not gonna skip any boxes, because ultimately, yes, I want you to come home, and yes, I don't want you to, pretty much, ruin your finances in case something, terrible or horrible or even mildly inconvenient would happen when you're traveling.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Victoria. And April, over to you about, the value of a travel advisor and, that re-emergence of them coming to the rescue.
Yeah, gosh, those 25 years for me have been in writing for the trade. So, you're pushing on an open door with that question, because, travel advisors are our lifeblood. We don't want to go back over old arguments, but, after back in the day when we all said the travel advisor is dead, it doesn't exist anymore. Then they came back, there was resurgence, and that is just going to happen again and again, because, as we've all said, why would you want to do any of this on your own without any help, or being able to WhatsApp someone at 1 a.m. in the morning and say, this has happened, that's happened, and your agent is just there for you. They're on your side, right? That's what they're there for. They're passionate about what they do. They'll work long hours, and obviously it's been difficult for the time being because a lot of them are still at home, and it's difficult, but it's an advantage because they're not leaving their retail premises at 5 o'clock. They're at home, they're active, they're ready to sort of help the client whenever they need them. And certainly we've heard so many stories about how they've gained new customers because they went above and beyond to help people who weren't even their customers. Someone who said, my neighbor said you might be able to help me. Can you help me? And they stepped in and they helped. And then they've become a customer. And again, I agree with the fact that people who've never used them before and younger, whatever we call them these days, your younger customers are appreciating the value. And it's also been great to see it kind of combines that question about sharing your stories and the value of an advisor. So many of them that really, really have fantastic profiles now on Instagram, which is obviously a medium that you want to be in if you're trying to inspire younger travelers. And as soon as there's an announcement about, a change in restrictions, they're on there. Inspirational pictures, but fact. This is how this is how I'm going to help you. This is how we can get you to Greece tomorrow because the change has happened. And we've also seen, I think it comes back to confidence as well. Travel advisors just must be confident that they do provide a valuable role and what they do is important. And once you have that confidence in yourself, then maybe you can start to approach your local media. We've seen and heard so many of our great travel advisors on TV, on radio, that perhaps just wouldn't have been there before. So they're now being seen as the expert, the go-to person. And this one on the show, quick, who can I phone? I'll phone that agent who I've dealt with before and I know knows what they're talking about. So it's an opportunity to seize and just show how confident you are in what you do, really, I would say. And don't be afraid to approach the media, because I think so often they just think, it's not a story, no one's going to care about what I've done. But, certainly for us, for the trade, and hopefully, for consumer press as well, there's some great stories and some compassionate stories and inspiration stories out there. So just give it a try. Don't be afraid of trying to approach journalists. We're not as scary as you think. I hope we've shown.
No, that's so true. Everything you said. And yeah, to every advisor listening, I am your PR person for Global Travel Collection. I am often in touch with all of these reporters all the time. So as I said before, please share any and all interesting stories so I can go back to the media to share with them as well. And April, you mentioned something interesting too about, the younger people maybe appreciating the value of a travel advisor more than ever before. And that is actually something we found true with Global Travel Collection and Internova Travel Group survey that we conducted, that especially during this time, there was a large percentage of millennials that would consider working with a travel advisor now, especially because of the pandemic. So I guess Natalie, for that question of how advisors and press can work together, just wanted to pass it to you to see if you had anything else to add for that too.
I think it's super helpful to have feedback or information from travel advisors, because you are the people who are booking travel for people who are not me. And I think about trips in one way. I see what my friends are doing on social media. You see other articles, but you're getting the very interesting requests from people who are out there, or you are on the ground seeing these restrictions in real life. So if anything ever interesting happens to you, I don't know for everybody, but for a lot of journalists, the contact information is available on Twitter, or people will DM me on Instagram, because I will literally be asking for people to all the time, or our email addresses are usually available on the websites that we write for. So if you're ever hearing anything interesting, I am literally working on something right now that was just a one-off comment from a travel advisor 2 days ago. So it's super valuable information. It is not, we get so many unhelpful emails all the time that are like, new brunch at Spago, which we cannot write about, but we can write about these interesting things happening to your clients. So please just reach out and tell us those juicy tidbits.
Thanks, Natalie. And Arnie?
Yeah, I mean, travel advisors are on the front line of identifying trends. There's no question. We did a story, and it was because an advisor had told us what he was doing, which was a term that's been picked up after that article appeared, trip stacking. The idea that you have, and this is a trend where you have a trip booked, but because of all the uncertainty that's around right now, you have plan B, you have plan C, you have plan D, so that things might change as things go along. And I mean, sitting in our home offices, we wouldn't have had a clue that trip stacking was happening. But because an agent had talked about it, it became not only a Travel Weekly story, but then became a consumer story as well.
Right. I remember that one. Celine, and yours, about you, or anything you want to add to that?
Sure. I mean, Victoria mentioned travel insurance, and I think that travel advisors are in many ways the best kind of travel insurance. And, April mentioned the idea of confidence. They should know that. I mean, whether we're talking about how we cover travel or even how we travel ourselves. I mean, Victoria, I take out travel insurance now. I have never taken out travel insurance in my whole life. And I think that, the idea of pitching to press, the experiences of your clients, and even, I go back to the client in the igloo. If something like that has happened and you have gotten someone out of a bind like that, those are the stories that we want to tell and that we should tell now, because I think that all the anxiety, knowing that, yes, things do happen, but there's a way we can still take care of you, that is a really important message. Because yes, things are going to happen right now. That's just the landscape we're in. Knowing how to prevent those things from happening, but most importantly, knowing that there is a system in place that can help you when the worst does happen. So if you have those stories, if you have those experiences, please tell us, because those are the most important stories I think we can talk about right now to inspire confidence and to keep people traveling.
Absolutely. And Paul?
A couple things. One is the kind of things that I always look for, especially from travel advisors, is finding an experience that I've never heard of. I mean, I know all of us, like Natalie said, we get all these emails for, oh, the Hotel X has a new spa. And it's like, no one cares. It's the same thing we've seen a million times. But, like I wrote a couple stories for Rob Report, one about the Shogun experience in Japan, where you can literally rent out an old shogunate castle, and they give you this whole program where you ride in on a horse, and there's all this, like, you live like a shogun for 4 days. Or there's the James Bond experience I just wrote about, where you're literally reenacting scenes from the movie in private planes and jumping off bridges and stuff. So like finding those really unique experiences are really valuable for me, because I can then pitch those stories to editors. But I would say that the other thing from a travel advisor standpoint, and sometimes I've heard a lot of complaints, is that they're really good at one thing, but they're not good at all the things. And I know that's asking a lot, but I know a lot of people want this seamless approach to their travel where they have their hand held through the process. So from knowing how miles work, to be able to use, your millions of miles to book the proper rewards, to getting someone on the ground at the hotel to meet you and get you that reservation at that restaurant that you didn't even know about. But like every little piece of the trip, if a travel advisor can really get into that detail, I think it's invaluable.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to go over to some of the chat questions that were submitted. Someone did ask an interesting question. They want to know if any and all of the panelists have used a travel advisor for their extensive travel before. So I'm just going to throw it out there for everyone to answer, and we can go to the next question after that. So Arnie, how about you?
Absolutely, yes. I have a great relationship with a great travel advisor.
Awesome. That's what we love to hear. And April, Stalene, anyone else?
Yeah, I will tell you, even, I go to Greece almost every summer and I know the country really well. I still use a travel advisor who might even be watching, actually. but I absolutely do. And it's been important that I do, because even in a country that I know really well, situations have arisen where I need their help.
Right.
If I may, I just had one other thing. We've been focusing on the pandemic and how important a travel advisor is during the pandemic. But the fact is, a great travel advisor adds value every step of the way, pandemic or not. The things, particularly at the luxury end, upgrades. If you have a problem, they often have a relationship with the general manager of the property you might be staying at that you have the problem with. And, beyond the pandemic, beyond all the minutia that has made travel a little bit more challenging, travel agents' value has been longstanding. And what I'm hoping is that the people who find that out during the pandemic, who are just now coming to the travel agents, once they have that experience, I think they will be lifelong clients.
Right. April, and then anyone else?
Well, I have many friends who are travel agents. As I said, I haven't been around for such a long time. But I guess most of my trips that I do, they're work trips. So the one with the hotel is taking care of me. They're sending a car to the airport. Those kind of things I'm really lucky to experience. And when I do have an actual time off holiday, I just kind of flop in a heap somewhere in the UK. So I guess I should be giving them the opportunity to help me on some of these things. But I always think as well, they're too busy. I don't want to bother them with things. So no, I haven't, unfortunately, been able to put any business the way of any of my travel agent friends, unfortunately. Sorry if any of you are watching out there.
No, I understand, especially with media, sometimes things are tricky and planning trips and whatnot if it's for work. And then companies do have, the travel built in sometimes as well. So that makes sense. Paul, Natalie, Victoria, anything before we move on to the next question?
I'm thinking of a time that I booked work travel myself and ended up having to change hotels because the hotel was so bad. So that should be a service that we use sometimes for trips where we're trying to just get the cheapest thing possible. Where you end up with a room with a window, or you get on the right flight. So I could definitely benefit from one.
Awesome.
I would love to use a travel advisor in the future, but at the moment, it's sort of I rely on my fellow travel writers to guide me in a place that I don't know very well.
Same.
Yes. Well, if that changes in the future, we have people ready. And I guess for the last question, anything you want to cover just before we end here? We have 1 minute left. Like any pandemic trend that has most surprised you, perhaps? No. Yes. Maybe. I love the
mean,
idea of private villas and yachts.
Yeah, it's
One thing that did surprise me was how fast World Cruises sold out. I mean, within 24 hours, World Cruises, private jet experiences, as soon as they're put out there, they're gone, they're filled. So, you know, the speed with which some of these events have occurred did surprise me, for sure.
It's not necessarily travel related, but it's luxury related. There's going to be a shortage of champagne soon, guys, apparently. So, you know, we're heading into some disastrous territory here. I was speaking to someone from Laurent Perrier yesterday who said it's coming, which just shows you again that I think this pent up demand to enjoy ourselves, to travel, to see our friends, do all these nice things is there. And I think that's just one thing that surprised me. So I think I may have to try and stock up on one bottle of expensive champagne somewhere.
One thing I've noticed is that there's I'm sure you've all seen this, the huge uptick in traveling locally, going to national parks and, you know, just sort of exploring your own country by car or by rail, you know, ways to avoid airports and airplanes. But would love to know more about the luxury side of being able to do that, because, you know, you go to Sequoia National Park and the options just aren't that great as far as like staying in a nice place or whatnot, even glamping if you want to do that. So getting into the luxury side of local park travel and whatnot would be, I'd be fascinated to learn more about, I think.
Yeah,
because there's
absolutely.
such a wide interest in exploring local.
Yes. Well, I'm so sorry, but we have to wrap up. I'm getting texts about the next show starting. But thank you to everyone for watching, for being here, to our advisors and partners, and Angie Global Travel Collection, everyone who made this possible, and especially our incredible panelists. Thank you so much. This was incredible. So thank you again, and take care, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye.